8:40 here, so I'm reading in all the best places, in all the elite news media, the taken for granted declaration that Israel just can't kill its way to peace. Israel just can't kill its way to safety. And if that's true, if that's what all the wise, the smart, the credentialed people are saying, that Israel just can't just kill its way to safety, then does Israel need, say, a different communication style? So right now, Israel's communicating through a ground offensive into Lebanon. But maybe if Israel just switched to a more feminine communication style, a more cooperative communication style. I'm thinking if Israel just would tell Hezbollah, look, when you send bombs into Israel, it makes me feel unsafe, right? I'm not saying you're doing a bad thing. I'm just noting that when you bomb my country, this is how it makes me feel. It makes me feel unsafe, and it makes me feel like lashing out against you. And so if Israel used this different language, this I language, about how unsafe it feels when Hezbollah is bombing it, and maybe if Israel could just communicate to Hamas that, hey, when you come into Israel and you slaughter 1,200 of our citizens and you rape our women and you take 200 Israelis captive, it makes me feel really insecure. And it makes me feel really vulnerable and even scared and frightened. And I know you don't want to make me feel those things. So when I feel scared and frightened and vulnerable, it makes me want to lash out and kill 40,000 of your citizens in Gaza. Perhaps this more cooperative communication style, that's what we need to get things rocking in the Middle East and restore peace and just a more feminine, nurturing environment in Lebanon and Beirut without all the nasty masculine invasions and bombing and shooting. Don't we have enough killing, guys?
That they're sitting down, but the New Yorker and the New York Times have endorsed Kamala Harris for president.
Wow.
So I know it's a shock to everyone, but I just want to get it out there first.
That could really turn the tide in Door County.
It could be decisive. I think in this Door election County, contest. Yeah,
Allegheny County, like these are places that have been waiting.
These are places that are filled with political cartoonists.
Yeah,
and that's the
New Yorker.
Indeed, the New York Times editorial board writes this morning that Kamala Harris is the only patriotic choice for president. So really, there's no more debate to be had.
There's no more debate to be had. Interesting to be lectured on what patriotism is by the New York Times, which has, of course, been a questionable guarantor source and supporter of the United States.
The decades of liberal complaining about how conservatives and Republicans question the patriotism of the left. But that, of course, is now tossed into the garbage bin because Harris has appropriated patriotism. Therefore, if you dissent from her, your patriotism is up for question as well.
Okay, I'm going to bring up one other thing, and then we got to get to Israel. So here's the other thing I wanted to bring up, which is Saturday Night Live was on Saturday night, as we know, first show. And they did their typical, they had a pretty bad Trump sketch making fun of the assassination attempts, which I thought was pretty scandalous. Even now, I mean, there are many things you could make fun of, but that is not like cricket. Then Dana Carvey came out as Joe Biden, and Dana Carvey, of course, maybe the greatest of the political impressionists of our lifetime, did 2 minutes on Biden. Basically, the entire thing was Biden as a senile Biden, and in the classic situation in which reality outstrips fiction, Biden then came out the next day, was asked about his response to the strikes in Yemen, and said he believed that collective bargaining was really going to turn the tide So we don't have a president. We have a president who is, we literally before a camera, literally just made clear to us.
So why can't Israel kill its way to safety? Isn't that how most wars end? Right? You kill a sufficient number of the other team that they give up or run away or surrender. Look, we're all locked in an iron cage together. And if my group kills a sufficient number of your most effective, most intelligent, most formidable fighters and commanders, then my group wins. I mean, how many Muslims and Arabs do you think there are in the Middle East who want to destroy Israel and have IQs north of 145? Right? In the Middle East, right, the majority of people with IQs north of 145 are going to be Ashkenazi Jews. There aren't that many Arab and Islamic geniuses. I don't think that Hamas could have ever pulled off its October 7 attack without Yahya Sinwar. Right? He is an extraordinary terrorist leader, and if Hamas didn't have him, they would not have been nearly so successful. I don't think Hezbollah is going to be nearly as successful and as powerful without all its leaders now that they've been eliminated by Israel. And if you can look at the situation in the Middle East today and say, oh, there's no difference on the ground, right? There has not been a shift in power in the Middle East. You're completely delusional, right? Israel has changed the game in the Middle East. Israel has shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran looks feckless. Hezbollah looks feckless. Hamas has been crushed. The axis of resistance has been destroyed, and much of Hezbollah's arsenal has been blown up. If you kill enough of the other team, particularly its most intelligent, most effective fighters, and you destroy much of its arsenal, how do you not win? Isn't that a traditional formula for winning? Right? You drop enough bombs, you kill enough of their infrastructure, their leaders, you blow up enough of their arsenal, and yeah, I think Israel can kill its way to peace. I know that's kind of a low-class, working-class, low IQ, unprestigious perspective, but I think Israel can very much kill its way to peace, in particular, given that it's not exactly going up against the cognitive elite. All right. So, want to know what parts of Beirut are controlled by Hezbollah? Google Maps tells you indirectly. Hezbollah has taken entire neighborhoods and prohibited anyone from taking photos there. So Google cannot do their street view in Hezbollah neighborhoods. So it's quite easy to detect which neighborhoods are Hezbollah's neighborhoods, and why not blow them to smithereens? When we killed Osama bin Laden, did the New York Times call it a major escalation against Al-Qaeda? Why is killing terrorists who are seeking to kill you only an escalation when Jews do it? Did Netanyahu just pull off the Godfather baptism scene, eliminating Hezbollah while addressing the UN? Mickey Cows, is this the false Kamala who was running for president in 2019? Sounds like the real Kamala to me. 2019, Kamala gets a standing ovation for criticizing Trump's efforts to secure the border. Here we go.
Because we have a president of the United States who has created a fiction about a crisis at the border, and he has held up the United States government and its workers around his vanity project called a wall.
Is that the real Kamala Harris? Israel is showing the world what can be unburdened by what has been. Instead of celebrating with the free world, the Biden administration, like the Obama one before it, is full of egomaniacs who are crushed to find that wagering their entire careers on rebalancing the Middle East in favor of Iran was not a brilliant idea. Hope that Amos Hochstein, Wendy Sherman, and others are marinating in how profoundly stupid they look. Jordan has fired 0 rockets at Israel. Number of Jordanians dead, 0. Egypt has fired 0 rockets at Israel. Number of Egyptians dead, 0. Not that complicated. Israel has become the superpower of the Middle East, filling a void left by the Obama, Biden, Harris administrations. Arabs respect power, not weakness. Many Middle East countries are ordered and happy right now. More happy people in Syria. Meanwhile, Team Biden debates whether to fly the White House flag at half-mast over the untimely death of yet another austere religious scholar in Islam. I really could care less what statement any Arab foreign ministry puts out tonight. Every single Arab partner of the United States is ecstatic. Nasrallah was their enemy, right? Nasrallah was Shia, and our Arab partners are all Sunni. The sooner Israel defeats Iran's multi-front war, the sooner Arab-Israeli normalization can advance. It's interesting to watch leaders of small countries accomplish what in the United States we are told is impossible. Bukele in El Salvador dismantling organized crime, Viktor Orban stopping illegal immigrants at the border, Milei slashing the bureaucratic state in Argentina, Netanyahu destroying his enemies. You're watching the 44-year-long Iranian project go down the drain in real time. Israel has erased a decade's worth of work in less than 2 weeks. Now, crazy praise for that ridiculous David Samuels essay that I took apart last week. David Samuels has written the most important essay of the year. My God, who is this fool? He's with Tablet magazine. David Samuels is the best journalist in America, not afraid of skating fast over thin ice. This is David Goldman. Here he channels Thomas Pynchon in a self-consciously ironic romp. David Goldman is saying this? If international humanitarian law is to survive today's existential challenges, the United States and its allies need to treat it not as an optional constraint to be adjusted or shrugged off as needed, but as an unmoving pillar of the global legal order. Well, when you're fighting for your survival, you're fighting for your people, you're fighting for your interests, and the other side is not abiding by international humanitarian law, what exactly are you supposed to do? Yes, we're all locked in an iron cage together. I am your bunkmate, and yes, this is no homo.
That he does not have his mental faculties sufficient unto the day. Clearly, the 25th Amendment is not going to be invoked. But I will say this, that whoever is president came out with a decent statement about what happened in Lebanon and the strike on Nasrallah after somebody finally brought justice to the United States and others for the murder of 241 Marines in a barracks in 1983, the murder of 89 Jews at the Amla Jewish Center in.
So, have you heard of a book called Surrounded by Idiots? All right, that title spoke to me because there are a lot of people I know in life who think that pretty much everyone else is an idiot. And who is an idiot? Anyone who is not them, essentially. Anyone who's different from them is considered an idiot. And it's helpful to understand yourself, all right? The more clearly you understand yourself, the more effectively you're going to be able to read other people. And this book, Surrounded by Idiots, The 4 Types of Human Behavior and How to Effectively Communicate with Each in Business and in Life. It divides people up into 4 groups. But what Israel's doing right now in the Middle East is a form of communication. They are making clear the price of going to war with Israel and sending rockets into Israel. This is a different form of communication. And we're all familiar with these types. They're labeled here red, yellow, green, and blue. Red, aggressive, ambitious, strong-willed, goal-oriented, pushing, problem solver, pioneer, decisive, innovator, impatient, controlling, convincing, performance-oriented, powerful, results-oriented, initiator, speed, timekeeper, intense, opinionated, straightforward, independent. All right, this is Israel right now. All right, so Israel's in its red mood. So the better you know yourself, right, the better you will do communicating with other people.
Communicating with some people feels so effortless, while others seem like puzzles without solutions. No matter how hard you try, you just can't explain yourself or understand them. What if I told you there's a key to unlocking effective communication with anyone, no matter how difficult they seem? What if you could walk into a room and be able to see what your boss, client, or colleagues are actually thinking and feeling? Imagine knowing their fears and desires without them saying a single word.
I found this book incredibly useful.
In the search of a deeper understanding of human behavior, I came across this amazing book titled Surrounded by Idiots: The 4 Types of Human Behavior, How to Understand Those Who Cannot Be Understood by Thomas Erickson. I really enjoyed the book, and I think you will too. Let's get started. Part 1, 4-color framework. Erickson divides people into 4 groups: red, yellow, green, and blue. Reds are natural leaders who like to take charge. They make quick decisions, focus on results, and always want to win. They're so competitive that they might even try to win when playing simple games with their 6-year-old kid. Reds like to be the boss and tell others what to do. They tend to be straightforward and blunt. Sometimes how intense they act can come across as too pushy and hurt others' feelings. Yellows are inspiring. Yellows love to talk. You hear them before you see them, as they are always talking to everyone. Yellows are happy, friendly, and love to cheer others on. They want to include everyone and make sure we're all having a good time. They're always coming up with new, creative, and fun ideas. However, they don't always finish what they start. They like thinking about ideas rather than working on them and completing those ideas. Greens are stable. Greens are quiet and reliable. They're always there for their friends and team. Greens tend to be the calmest of the 4 colors. They don't like change, loud arguments, or surprises. This can make it hard for them to voice their thoughts or handle tricky situations. Greens like routines and schedules. They want to know what to expect each day. Blues are analytical. Blues think carefully and want everything to be perfect. They notice little details that other people might miss. Because they hate to make mistakes, blues double-check their work all the time. If you gave a blue a 50-page instruction manual, they'd read every word and then ask for more, just to be sure they understood you. Blues can struggle making decisions and seeing the big picture because they can get lost in the details. Here's a real-life example to understand the colors better. Imagine you and your friends are planning a dinner party. This is a great way to see the 4 colors in action. A red is going to quickly take over the initial party planning. They'll rush to decide what day the party is, what time it starts, and then delegate the rest of the work for the group to figure out. They've already decided. The party is going to start Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. It's important for them that decisions are made quickly and everyone has a task to do. But they don't care about the details, and they don't care what day works best for you, because they've already made.
Right. If you can't understand other people, either you're not honest with yourself or you're just under too much strain and stress to do a little bit of work to understand how other people are experiencing the world. Right, Iran and Israel look at the world differently, right? And you and your boss, in all likelihood, have different personalities.
Made up their mind. Now, go take care of the rest. They'll see you Saturday. Your yellow friend looks like they are glowing and bubbling with joy. They are envisioning all of the fun, exciting, and engaging party ideas to share with the group. It could be a costume party or a cocktail party. They're so excited, they'll keep bringing up different ideas of what it could be.
Right, so some people react quickly. Right, reds, right? Some people react slowly, like the blue types and the yellow types. And then there are people who tend to stay fairly calm. These are the stable, the green types. So when you can figure yourself out, right? And you can recognize your own behavior, other people's behavior. And this book notes behavior is a function of personality and surrounding factors. Behavior is that which we can observe. Personality is what we try to figure out. Surrounding factors are the things that influence what's going on. So the stronger your self-understanding is, the greater your probability of adapting to the people around you so you don't make a giant ass of yourself.
And who should come. They want everyone at this dinner party to have fun, and it's only fun if everyone is involved. They don't care if it's realistic or not. They want this to be the best party ever. They're so excited they've already called the DJ to play music. You last heard them say something about a giant cake. You're not sure if any of this is really going to happen or is true, but you can feel their enthusiasm. When it comes to planning the party, greens are going to be the calm and balanced ones. They'll work behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly. Greens are happiest when there are no surprises or last-minute changes. They'll be warm and welcoming.
And some people are going to be red in some situations, green in other situations, yellow in some situations, and blue in others. Other people will only be one type. Right. So usually the situation will have a profound effect on you, but some people maintain pretty much the same personality no matter where they are. That's quite rare.
Welcoming to the guests and make sure everyone feels at home. If no one has stepped up, a green will make sure there's plenty of food and drinks. Their main goal is to make sure everyone feels comfortable and is enjoying themselves. They just won't be seeking any attention.
And I think the same template works for foreign affairs and foreign relations, right? Israel's right now very much a decisive red phase. And there's a time and a place for being in a red phase. and then other people just want to get along. All right, there's a time and a place where you want to cooperate. All right, we're all stuck in an iron cage with each other, and there'll be a time and a place where you want to cooperate, and a time and a place where you need to go to war. So Israel has been going to war and wiping out their enemies right now.
In Buenos Aires, India, the number of events that Hezbollah has the number of terrorist attacks on sources outside the Middle East and in the Middle East and to Jews and to non-Jews, and the idea that the initial response of the U.S. government would be to complain that Israel had somehow not provided adequate.
And so Israel apparently consulted with the United States about its plans for a limited ground offensive in Lebanon. And then the United States apparently immediately leaked what Israel confided in it. So it's for good reason that Israel is quite wary of sharing these details in advance with the U.S.
Early warning to the United States, which was an act of diplomatic graciousness, since it would then give the United States reason to claim that this was not its event, and so would not have to take responsibility for it if things had gone haywire. Anyway, that's the United States thing. So maybe we should just drop that and just talk about how unbelievable what just happened was, how unbelievable the last 2 weeks have been. I mean,
So I know many Orthodox Jews who claim you're not supposed to revel in the downfall of your enemies. But overwhelmingly, the more right-wing you are, the more you respond to natural incentives like reveling in the downfall of your enemies.
My lifetime in the annals of warfighting, maybe the first couple of weeks of the war in Iraq in 2003 had the same kind of impact. The astonishing advance of the U.S. military on all fronts and using weaponry we didn't even know we had. Weapons that, as the late Michael Kelly described as he was standing on a street corner, saw a cruise missile coming down the street in Baghdad, and then it hit an intersection and turned left because it was so precisely targeting using whatever.
All right, any certain cultures can create weaponry that is that advanced. And so what's often called white privilege is the result of certain genetics in certain environments. And it wasn't just something that was bestowed by the universe on people of European origin. And the vote, for example, was not granted to men. This is a person on Substack who uses the name Charlotte Wollstonecraft. The vote was not granted to men. Instead, it was an implicit exchange, political power in exchange for military service. Right? Once a well-regulated militia was declared necessary to the security of a free state, universal manhood suffrage soon followed. The Declaration of the Rights of Man was a product of the same movement, and it's not an accident. In the United Kingdom, property requirements weren't lifted until 1918 after a ruinous war of conscription. In the U.S., the reduction of the voting age from 21 to 18 was driven in part by the embarrassment of draftees shipped to Vietnam while still too young to cast a ballot. Right? So people who go fight for their country and get injured or die, all right, they're overwhelmingly men. American men must still register for selective service. Failure to do so renders one ineligible for federal assistance like student loans. Our last draftee was inducted in 1973, and these days our military vastly prefers an all-volunteer force, but Ukraine shows us what's possible. By contrast, women were granted the right to vote. All right, so the majority of this country, all right, the people who found it and who sacrificed for it, it makes sense that there would be some hesitation about granting all sorts of privileges to people who are parts of groups that did not contribute and sacrifice for the country to the same degree. Right? Women were given the right to vote. Right? We got it without incurring any formal civic obligations. Women don't risk getting blown up in a war. Right? Women got the right to vote pretty much the day that women decided they wanted it. Right? So male suffrage has historically been intertwined with civic obligation and conscription, right? The state's power to force a person into servitude and to face death, or at least being maimed. So I think we need much more of an emphasis on obligations, and that rights should follow from obligations. Right? feminism tends to portray voting issues as if men got the vote simply as a perk of being men, and then men decided to deny it to women to subjugate them, right? And this just does not hold credibility, right? Feminism is constantly accused of insincerity, and for very good reason, right? The rights and privileges that United States citizens enjoy is because of the overwhelming sacrifice of European men, European origins, Christian origins, men who fought and were willing to bleed and to die to build and protect this country. And so it would make sense that some of them would say, hey, why should we give away these rights to people and to groups who have not sacrificed to the same degree that we have?
Magical GPS it had to know exactly where it was going along a street grid. Anyway, and Dan, of course, that's experiences that you had as somebody in Iraq later. I'm told Jews are not supposed to revel in the misfortune of their enemies, and whoever can say that, I'm sick of this. I saw a whole bunch of liberal Jews and like Shaul Magid of Dartmouth and others.
October 7th revealed that Israel's intelligence capabilities were no longer.
This is Dan Senor. If you want to keep up with what's going on in Israel, I recommend his podcast, Call Me Back with Dan Senor.
What they once were. That the perception of Israel as this intelligence juggernaut was completely turned on its head by October 7th. And Israelis' confidence in their own intelligence capabilities had declined dramatically to the point that when Israeli security leadership said anything now, that we have a sense that when Iran is going to have a nuclear bomb, we have to do X, Y, and Z. We have a sense for this. We have a sense for that. There would be a big question. There'd be big debates inside Israel. Well, can we trust them? What do they know? Look how much they screwed up October 7th. Look how certain they were. They had this concepcia, the concept of the security situation in Gaza, and they were completely wrong about that. How can we trust them about anything? Well, what we do know, regardless of I think the Gaza situation, obviously, and the Lebanon situation are much different. But what we do know is basically since about 2006, since after the Second Lebanon War, Israel had built up an extraordinary intelligence capability in Lebanon and also in Iran, and it was expanded and accelerated as a result of the decision in 2012 for Hezbollah to directly engage in Syria. So this is now, I'm not the only one saying this. I'm sure many of you have heard this from various sources you speak to, but Hezbollah's decision at the direction of Iran to go defend Bashar Assad in Syria beginning in 2012, and the bloodshed that resulted, parenthetically, how many Sunni Muslims, hundreds of thousands of Sunni Muslims were slaughtered by Hezbollah since 2012, even up until today. And many of us had believed that war-fighting experience that Hezbollah had gained fighting in Syria made them a much more challenging enemy than Hamas. That is possibly true. But what the Israelis are now saying is, at the same time, by Hezbollah going so deep and making such a big commitment in Syria, Israel had a pretty good penetration of the Syrian leadership and the security leadership in Syria. They had incredible intelligence capabilities in Syria. So when Hezbollah basically integrated into the Syrian leadership and armed forces, it opened up all sorts of channels for Israel to gather information.
So I'm a convert to Judaism, and there are many privileges that come with being a convert to Judaism, but it's also a highly competitive, highly demanding way of life, Orthodox Judaism. So you get a strong sense of community, you get very clear direction, and you also have a ton of obligations. So you don't just get to milk the cow without buying it. So I'm quite impressed by this Substacker that I just discovered today, Charlotte Wollstonecraft. And she notes that most people that she knows who are nice are also pretty decent, right? It's very rare that you encounter someone who's nice and is ethically horrible, right? Niceness strongly correlates with goodness and decency. So one of the major mistakes people make is they think manners are only the expression of happy ideas. There's a whole range of behavior that can be expressed in a mannered way. That's what civilization is all about. Right, doing it in a mannered and not an antagonistic way. One of the places we went wrong was the naturalistic Rousseauian movement of the 60s, in which people said, why can't you just say what's on your mind? In civilization, there have to be restraints. If we followed every impulse, we'd be killing one another. So niceness is also manners, right? It's operating in a way that is socially pleasing. And rudeness and social aggression is much more dominantly carried out by people who are not so good. Right? I just noticed a very strong correlation between niceness and goodness. And here's another excellent commentary she has. The scrapping of agreed upon social scripts and life scripts also means constant uncertainty about relationships and mismatched expectations. In many ways, dating was easier in my time in the late 70s and the 80s, right? There was much more of a script for asking someone out on a date, and you're expected to pay and you're expected to pick her up. And there was a script. And then we got hookup culture, and there's much less of a script nowadays. So in a traditional perspective on life, right? Civilization, tradition depends upon scripts, right? The modern liberal secular notion of make up whatever rules work for your individual situation takes a lot of brain power, and it increases pressure compared to follow the etiquette, follow the ideals learned at your mother's knee, right? Follow the rules, follow the scripts. Freedom is scary, right? Freedom is valuable, but it is scary. And here's one paragraph from another Substack I found, Philosophy of Psychiatry, a new sweeping review for psychiatry. And it notes that mental disorders are not spiking because more patients are developing psychiatric disease, but because the ideal of individual autonomy has become the standard of what is normal around the globe. And most societies are not individualist, right? Life usually works whereby a group strategy will outcompete the individualist approach. It's no coincidence that anxiety and depression are the most common mental disorders. They express our failure in attempting to fulfill the impossible demand of individual autonomy. We are more anxious, not because our world has become more dangerous, on the contrary, it has become safer, but because our desire for control is out of proportion. We are more depressed, not because our lives are hopeless and meaningless. The opposite is true, but because we are confronted with too many choices. We are set up for unrealistically high expectations, and we blame ourselves for any and all failures. Let's welcome Elliott Blatt back onto the show. Elliot, what's going on, bro?
Blessings. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, I tried to call in yesterday, but you didn't notice. But I didn't have much to say, so I didn't press the issue. So, no
That's
harm.
very green of you, bro.
I'm very green. Yeah, I'm the greenest mofo that ever lived.
Yes.
So, it was a very interesting conversation between you and Dooovid yesterday. You pressed him 3 times on a very specific question, and he somehow managed to evade the question 3 separate times.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an amusing exchange, and I think he finally escaped without having been forced to answer. And you know, it's clear that Dooovid lives in a very particular hero system that's not, shall we say, reality based. You know.
Well, it's not ours. We're surrounded by idiots, bro.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to accuse Dooovid of being that, but I sort of understand where he's coming from, because he wants a particular worldview to be true.
Yeah.
And this particular worldview kind of gives him meaning. This meaning, and the meaning is that, you know, if we're all kind and righteous to one another, everything will be fine. And, you know, taking out a good part of your enemy with a pager ruse or bombing Nasrallah's compound, these just don't comport with that worldview. And so he wants the actions of Israel to be ineffective and unrighteous and not praiseworthy. And I think that was the crux of your disagreement. No?
I hope so, because I'm afraid that what's the sector of the internet where Dooovid gets the most strokes?
Well, it's definitely in my opinion, it's definitely the anti-Semitic left. It's
Okay.
the anti-Semitic
So
right or
he's
left.
adapting himself to the place where he'll get the most praise.
Yeah, and I think in fact he's been captured.
Yeah.
because he presents himself as a sort of Jewish apologist, but so he gets thrust in front of audiences that want to hear criticisms of Jews, and he spends a lot of his time there. And I think slowly over time he's been
Captured.
Yeah, for lack of a better word, yes.
Well, he knows
So
where the
I
applause
don't want to
comes. He knows where he's going to be praised.
Yeah. And I listened to one of those streams, and it was very clear that he received lots of praise for his criticisms of Israel, and I think that was pretty seductive for him.
Yes. Because I suspect he does not suffer from a surfeit of praise in his day-to-day life.
It's very without being declarative. It's certainly the likelihood is high of what you said is true.
So I hope you're right, but I'm afraid that I'm right.
Oh. So meaning me?
Yeah, you thought that this came from a hero system of why can't we just all get along? And my more reductive analysis was that this comes from discovering that there is one sector of the internet where you'll get a lot of praise, and it's the Jew-hating sector. And if you can accommodate yourself to them and make yourself useful to them, you'll get praise to high heaven.
True. Yes, you'll get praise, you'll get clicks, you'll be celebrated. And then, so I had made a comment in the chat about potentially that marijuana use may be at play here. And I think the more I think about it, widespread marijuana use has sort of sacrificed our ability to engage with reality as it is, because marijuana sort of allows you to escape into fantasy, and that might be the subtlest poison that marijuana use presents, and it's so subtle that it's very hard to articulate.
But it is a traditional Jewish practice to get a few joints for Rosh Hashanah.
Well, who am I to argue a tradition?
That was killer. That's what makes Dooovid so great, is the honesty. It's like, I think you're getting a joint for Rosh Hashanah.
He's straight up. Yeah, you can't accuse Dooovid of being dishonest. No. But you could accuse him of having a few blind spots. So I don't know how long marijuana has been quasi-legal in California, but it's strongly correlated with a decline of the common space being healthy. I mean, are these causal? Are they correlated? We can argue, but I think a culture, ultimately I can understand now in retrospect why drugs were so penalized and so much opprobrium associated with drug use, because it has effects, and you can see them and feel them.
Oh, it's so dramatic. I can't name any other thing that so consistently turns people into losers. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, only about 10% of people who drink become alcoholics. But the percentage of people who become losers taking marijuana, or it becomes a gateway drug for something worse, just anecdotally seems much higher than that.
Yeah, it seems to open up like it seems to make checking out acceptable, or escaping acceptable. There's a very it seems to provide a rationalization for people to not apply themselves because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Type of thinking. So strongly opposed. And I was one of those people that used to think that marijuana was really no big deal, but it's a much bigger deal now.
Now, I've never had it. So when did you last indulge? Last Rosh Hashanah?
I had it about 6 or 7 years ago. It had been making the rounds on like the Joe Rogan podcast, or there was a certain buzz around marijuana, pardon the pun, that it had all of these salutary effects, and that we should all try it. We should all do it. And so I went to the park, because this is before it was legal. And then I went to the park and I bought some like $10 worth of marijuana just because I wanted to see what I was missing,
And what kind of gentleman sold it to you?
Oh, he was from the Dark Continent, shall we say?
Okay. And how did you know that he was a reputable, ethical dealer that you could trust with high quality product?
Well, I didn't, and this is in effect part of the appeal, because there was sort of this romantic allure to such a forbidden transaction. It added to the appeal, if that makes sense. If you're going to sin, you need to sin boldly. You ever heard that?
Yeah. That's Martin Luther.
Yeah. So I decided, one day I was going to sin boldly. and so, I bought my $10 worth. And it was just dumb. It was just a stupid experience from start to finish. Big mistake. I rue the day.
So have you been back to the sports bars? Because I'm returning to the sports bars for football season, and I am enjoying like really good, intense conversations.
Really? I've actually, of all of my vices, I've actually snipped that one from the list in which I'm permitted to indulge in. So no, the answer is no.
I can't think of anything else where it's so easy to connect with people aside from church or synagogue. Or yoga. Yoga is really easy to connect with people when you go to a yoga class.
But are these people you want to connect with?
Yes. I'm having intense conversations with them. I mean, we're not usually exchanging numbers, but I'm having like good, deep conversations about what ended a marriage, and yeah, I'm enjoying the conversations.
Okay, well, that hasn't been my experience. So I respect the fact that you've enjoyed higher quality interactions than what I've had when I tried to engage last year with the NFL fan community. I found the community. I found the people wholly uninteresting, not worthy of emulation, boring. I had nothing. I didn't come away from the interactions feeling enriched.
Okay.
So, I'm not trying to make a broad. I'm just talking about my personal.
Yeah. Different people have different experience, and it's something that you can't optimize. Like you can't walk in and use tricks to optimize intense conversations, right? They either happen or they don't, and you can't push it, you can't optimize it, and often I will walk in and because I usually don't go with a friend. Sometimes I will go with a friend, but usually I don't show up with a friend. So I have to strike up a conversation with a stranger to make it socially rewarding for me. And this rarely happens in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. And so I've done some thinking about this. So I've decided that, being an under-earner, I decided I need to earn more. And so those hours which I would allocate to, passively watching a football game, I've decided to actively apply to my budding little business opportunity. So there's a practical dimension to this.
And is there a financial payoff, or is it impossible to optimize that as yet?
There is a financial payoff, and it's a classic thing. Hard work pays off, bro. Like you do the work, you get paid. If you're doing valuable work, if you're doing work that people need. So I found that since committing to this project more wholly, that my earnings have increased, and it's been quietly satisfying.
And how are you going to deal with a Kamala Harris presidency?
I'm certainly not going to be happy. In fact, I'm going to be crushed for a solid week, I think. I'm not well situated to absorb this particular blow. Will it be life-ending? Probably not. But am I going to be happy? Not at all. The choice seems so stark to me. I'm hoping I don't even have to grapple with this eventuality. I don't think it's I think it's possible, but I think it's less likely. I think Trump is going to pull it out, but I have a lot of doubts and a lot of reservations and a lot of anxiety around this. This is very triggering. So I've decided that I'm going to wait until like the first or second week of October before I actually emotionally engage with the whole election. How are you planning to manage?
I think I'll be fine. I'll be disappointed for a few hours, maybe a few days. I can't fully predict how I will experience it. I mean, I think I did pretty well when Trump lost the last election, so it was bitter for a few days.
Yeah, it was more than a few days for me. It was a couple of weeks solidly. I'd really overinvested in this emotionally. And so it took me a good 2 weeks to sort of reestablish my bearings. I'm building in a lot of insulation against it. I'm trying to be realistic because I was very confident about Trump winning. And I felt the rug pull in a very acutely, and I was very disappointed.
Now, what about Israel's stunning successes over the past 2.5 weeks? I've been giddy.
I've been giddy. I've been excited. I've been amazed, frankly. I try to manage my own giddiness, because giddiness, I've learned over the years, that giddiness is just setting yourself up for the rug pull. It's almost like that God is tempting you, and to engage in giddiness is almost to ensure the rug be pulled out from underneath you. How do you feel about giddiness?
I'm okay. Not everyone can handle it. So I get waves of very intense emotions. I get very enthusiastic about things, but particularly with my ADHD medication, I don't become manic, and I don't spend a lot of time in the despair and the depression.
Yeah, but giddiness. Okay, so let's work with giddiness and its definition. So giddiness to me is like a happiness derived of a bit of overconfidence. Is that
well, for me, first of all, it's an emotion that you feel, and you'd have to be. I would have to be less than human not to experience it. When Israel has the amount of success it's had over the past 2.5 weeks, there's no way that someone who is as deeply committed and fascinated by Israel as I am could not have giddy emotions. It would require that I turn off my humanity, not to feel giddy by Israel's stunning wave of successes. It's not something I'm choosing. It's something that's sweeping over me that I allow myself to experience.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I hear that and I feel those emotions, but there's also a part of me that kicks in that says the best place to be is neutrality, right? I don't, and this may be a neurotic overcompensation on my part, but when I feel like giddy emotions, I feel like there is the flip side, and so can you just be neutral and objective? Can you live your life a few notches above boring in this case? Now this
Right.
could be over intellectualizing, but
Well, I think it's more modern, right? What you're talking about is a high level of self-control. So the ancients and the people living in the Middle Ages, they would constantly swing from ecstasy and giddy to despair to anger to rage to laughter, because these things would all sweep through them. You are seeking a reflexive approach to
equanimity.
life, where you're constantly monitoring yourself and adjusting yourself rather than allowing these forces to just sweep through you.
Well, I would be, I personally, I'd be happy to sacrifice some giddiness if it meant preventing me from feeling the despair.
Mm-hmm.
It's like with gambling, the reason gambling is so seductive is that the pain of losing is much more acute than the joy of winning, right? And so the best thing to strive for is neutrality and just not gamble.
Now, are you pretty even keeled in most situations? Are you pretty much the same person in all the different situations that you enter, or do you change dramatically depending on the situation?
Lately I'm more even keeled. So I feel a lot of emotions. I feel them very intensely, but I also don't display a lot of emotion in public or in business settings. So people often say, "Oh, you're so calm," right? And they have no idea about the churning cauldron of rage that's like coursing through me. If only they knew, bro.
Right, but my
So
question was, are you basically the same person in different situations, or are you constantly changing? Because I feel like a completely different person when I'm in San Francisco as opposed to LA, as opposed to Sydney, as opposed to outback Queensland, Australia, as opposed to Jerusalem, as opposed to Tel Aviv. I feel myself changing significantly depending on the situation that I'm in. Do you experience yourself changing significantly depending on the situation that you're in? Whether I'm at work or whether I am at synagogue
well,
or whether I'm in charge or whether I'm taking orders, it has a profound effect on my personality.
the short answer is no. I'm obviously different in different circumstances. However, the challenge, the art, the goal of life is to adapt to your conditions, but not sacrifice your principles. If that makes sense.
Right. I mean, if someone forces you at gunpoint to give a blowjob, all right, you're the victim there. It doesn't make you a cocksucker.
Yeah. So pucker up, bro. Well, you'd have to. Hopefully, you're strategizing effectively enough to avoid those circumstances. But that you can't rule that circumstance out 100% as much as you'd wish to.
So, according to this book, Surrounded by Idiots, the green personality is called stable. It talks about calm, maximum effort for connection, minimal interest in change, a current time frame, supportive actions, and a tendency to reject conflict.
Yeah, I think that describes me pretty well. I feel like I'm a green.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my comfort zone. You know, that's what's. I feel like that's the strategy that I've employed throughout life, for better or worse.
So, do you think that you're surrounded by idiots? Because that does seem to be.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm not proud of this, and I don't mean this in some sort of egoistic arrogance, but I do find myself in the perspective in the situation where I'm thinking, why can't you understand this basic point? Question mark.
Yeah.
Like, if there's one phrase I want on my epitaph, it would be that. Like, why can't you understand this basic point? Question mark. And my entire life has been just navigating that one question. I don't know how you feel.
Well,
what color are you, Luke? What color is your parachute, Luke?
I would have to work it out. I'm not. Some people are one color pretty much in all situations, and I don't think that's true for me. When I am in charge and when I am responsible, then I'm red, meaning quick reactions, maximum effort to control, minimal interest for caution in relationships, current time frame, direct action, just kind of running things. But in other situations where, say, I'm taking orders, then yeah, I think I'm all over the map depending on the situation. But this notion that other people are idiots, this book argues that we just think that people are idiots when they're not like us, and most people are not like us, and therefore it's a lazy and ineffective perspective.
I can hear that. I can appreciate that. You know, I've often been accused of being impatient, and you know, it's probably true. But my impatience is sort of born out of this necessity to A, get to the point, B, be concise, C, focus on what's practical and actionable, and not get lost in a bunch of vague emotions. So I don't know. It's to me, impatience isn't necessarily a criticism. What do you think?
Well, it depends what works. I mean, the other day I lost my patience and yelled the F word at a truck driver who was maneuvering his semi, and he had to go past his driveway, you know, went through the sidewalk. So he had no choice but to do what he was doing. And so it did not serve me to yell the F word at him. He was not deserving of it, and it was not good for my own self-respect. So
hey, how do you feel when you lose control like that?
Well, it wasn't the worst thing. Like I didn't yell the F word at someone who was dangerous, right? So I was not pleased. I had to reassess. So I often think, how much should I remonstrate with people who are driving recklessly? For example, I have the walk signal up, but they turn right, you know, right in front of me. And so I wave my hands and go, what the heck? Because I feel like they should get some sort of signal that they've done something socially unacceptable. But I don't want to lose my cool. And sometimes I lose my cool, and sometimes I don't. So I think I haven't fine-tuned how much I can let people know that they're engaged in antisocial behavior while not straying from my own best interests. So it should be a kind of a mild, you know, throwing my hands up type of thing. But probably I should not yell the F word.
Yeah, I've noticed when I lose my cool, like there's this sort of like glandular rage, this rage that you can just feel throughout your body, you know? You can feel your liver, your adrenal glands. You just feel it completely, you know? And then it's sort of satisfying for like a split second, you know? And then there's this sort of cooling off period where you're like, you kind of know you've made a mistake, but that your body has to sort of readapt to civilized modes of being. And there's like a 1 or 2 minute period where you're like physically readapting to a state of non-rage. And then there's like this sort of moment of humor, like you're thinking, oh, this is funny. And then you can just sort of feel your composure reasserting itself.
So I remember. Go ahead.
Well, just being in an urban area, you're often, this process is far more common in an urban landscape than it is in the rural. So, in a way, urbanites go through this process and they learn to manage their emotions, and so therefore they come off as, urbane, I guess the word is, or civilized. They've gone through the process of being enraged and then recalibrating. Whereas if you're in the country, I think you could just kind of lash out and not experience any consequence. And so that's why ruralites tend to be a little bit rough on the edges.
How much time have you spent today in Lust?
Today?
Yes.
Almost not much.
Typically, on a typical day, how much time do you spend in Lust?
Well, lust is like the flip side of rage,
Mm-hmm.
The two are similar. Like, it's like
makes you feel powerful.
It's your
strong.
animal nature.
Yeah,
it's your animal nature, and it's like, over time you learn the pleasures, but also the pitfalls of your animal nature, and that as you get older, the cognizance of the pitfalls becomes stronger and stronger. So you're able to see your animal nature.
Right, but you didn't answer the question. How much time do you typically spend in lust a day, in a state of lust? For me, I'd say over the past 6 months, probably an hour a day.
A full hour, bro?
Yep. When I go to bed, that's when it happens. I go to bed, I'm finished with the day, I've had a busy day, I go to bed, and then the lust starts taking over.
I would say 15 minutes.
Wow.
I'm not just trying to brag. I'm just telling you the truth, bro.
Like, so, have you ever given money to an only?
I didn't have a career in the porn industry, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's like
right. But did you give? Have you given money to an OnlyFans girl?
I have not. Am I?
You've never. Out? Okay. Do you follow any thirst accounts on Instagram or on X?
No, because you know what? Years ago, I learned it's sort of part of my sort of spiritual practice was I would need to be able to manage lust rationally, right? So most American culture sort of kind of leads you in the direction of sort of just celebrating lust as a virtue or something without consequence. And they sort of pursue it to its maximum before they crash out and do something stupid or wind up in a very highly compromised situation, right? But I learned very early on that there's perils associated with lust that are real, and that it's in your best interest to manage them intelligently.
So you would not see any benefit in desexualizing your life. You don't need to remove certain content from your computer. You don't need to stop following certain accounts that are thirst accounts.
No, because I don't have them and I don't subscribe to them, because it's like, if I'm an arsonist, I don't need to go looking at pictures of fire. If I know my intrinsic nature, I'm inclined towards arson, I need to put a wall between myself and fire and gasoline and accelerants and cigarette lighters and matches. I learned that it's best to let those forces appear naturally and not go seeking them out.
So
like this idea of like, why do people even need porn, right? Like, do you really need porn to feel lust? I mean, that's always been very surprising to me. Like, why does this need to be prompted in your mind if it doesn't arise?
I want to go lust free for Rosh Hashanah, bro.
So what are you doing, bro? How are you gonna accomplish
that? I'm gonna get open and honest.
Hey, when does Rosh Hashanah start? Pardon me.
October 2nd, that evening.
Oh, soon. Very soon, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're gonna be without streams for a while.
Yeah.
So you're gonna atone, bro? You're gonna atone like there's no tomorrow?
So the equivalent of alcohol, so for the alcoholic, right, the substance of alcohol is something that he has a maladaptive reaction to. And so for under earners and for lustaholics and porn addicts and sex addicts and love addicts, it's the biochemical rush that you get from engaging in your addiction that we have to get sober from. Because I know for myself that there's a certain biochemical rush that I get from feeling like a victim when feeling like people have cut me out. So there was a gathering that I was going to go to, and I was counting on going to it with this attractive woman, but I'd misread the situation, and she said, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I can't give you a ride for XYZ reason." And so I was just prepared to give up on the gathering, but then I recognized that trait in myself that I wanted to enjoy the biochemical rush of feeling victimized and by staying home. And then I pushed myself to ask one more person, a bloke, for a ride. And he said, "Oh yeah, no problem." But earlier in my life in particular, I got this tremendous biochemical rush from feeling like other people were victimizing me. And there's a biochemical rush from under-earning, right? It makes your life smaller, so you have to make fewer choices, and you get to hide in the cave. So under-earning comes with a biochemical rush, and then there's a biochemical rush for looking at porn. There are times in my life when the most exciting dopamine-rich moments of my day were the hour a night I'd spend looking at pornography. Or there was a biochemical rush that I would get from the beginning of a new relationship, from falling in love. And it would just incapacitate my ability to make sound decisions.
Yeah, like if you, like there's the body and then there's the spirit. Right? So the more you emphasize the body, the less you get to partake of the spirit. And so if you see life like that, you'll recognize, or you start to think about, that there's a cost. There's a hidden cost associated with emphasizing the body through lust, thinking about lust, just the obsession, the amount of mental churn, the emotional churn that goes around all the feelings associated with lust. This all comes at the expense of, so that energy is sort of squandered when it could be applied toward, reestablishing and fortifying your connection with the spirit. This is the battlefield that we live on, bro.
Yeah, well, come down from Mount Olympus.
Your body is a battlefield. Your body is a battlefield. Love is a battlefield, if I can quote.
Come down from Mount Olympus. Like, what biochemical rushes have you been addicted to?
Alcohol, bro. Alcohol.
The substance itself.
Well, yeah. Like, I like my evening drinks. I like to have a bunch of drinks in the evening. It's just...
And so when did you last have a drink? Last night?
30 minutes ago, bro.
I'm sorry?
30 minutes ago, bro.
Oh, okay.
I'm not proud, bro. I'm not proud. Yeah, I know. I didn't want to appear to be moralizing in any of my comments. Like, I am not without sin, and so therefore I cannot cast any stones. But
so how
you need to
effective are those grand, sweeping spiritual perspectives that you're offering me on Lost? How effective are they vis-a-vis alcohol for you?
They're not effective, bro. They're not effective.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the last thing I wanted to do is sort of present myself as being somehow, holy or above all of this. I recognize there's certain struggles that one has, and these struggles are born out of the body. And so everyone has their own struggle with the body. And they're not easily winnable always.
I know a social group that you would be eligible to attend where you could make friends and, well, you couldn't really come back with amazing stories because what you hear here, let it stay here.
Is this Alcoholics Anonymous, bro?
Yes.
But
you could talk about your own experience.
Yeah, I know, but okay. All right, don't think I don't recognize the limitations, I do see an endpoint sometime, but in my current circumstance, a man needs to relax, bro. And like,
what have you got to lose?
Well, a couple of nights, sitting in a bunch of room with a bunch of retards. my
So how often, here's a quiz. How often do you have a drink containing alcohol? It would be every night, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how many standard drinks containing alcohol you have on a typical day? So 3?
Yes.
Okay. So 21 drinks.
More.
21 drinks. Yeah. 21 to 40 drinks a week, I think would be fair. How often do you have 6 or more drinks on one occasion?
None. 0. That's too much.
Okay. During the past year, how often have you found that you are not able to stop drinking once you had started?
Well, there's a ceiling on my drinking, so
So this isn't a problem, right? You don't drink to excess. You are able to stop after 3 or 4 drinks.
Stop. I'm not looking to get drunk. Right, and so once I feel relaxed, then I stop drinking.
Okay. During the past year,
there's a lot of mental.
Yeah. How often have you failed to do what was? How often have you failed to do what was normally expected of you because of drinking?
I wouldn't phrase it like that, but there's times when I could have performed better, for sure. So, failed to do what is expected. It's a very gray line, but I'm going to rephrase the question and say, I failed to perform to my best quite often.
When was the last time you were arrested because of your drinking?
When I was 18 in Mexico.
Okay. How often in the past year have you needed a drink in the morning to get yourself going?
Never.
How often have you had a feeling of guilt or remorse after drinking?
Frequently.
How often have you been unable to remember what happened the night before because you'd been drinking?
Almost never.
Have you or someone else been injured as a result of your drinking in the past year? Has a relative, a friend, doctor, or other health worker been concerned about your drinking and suggested you cut down?
My mother a very long time ago.
Okay, let's add this up here. Okay, your gender is male. You have a drink every night. You have 3 or 4. How often do you have 6 drinks or more? Never. You are able to stop. How often have you failed to do what was normally expected of you? I'm going to just put never. How often have you needed a drink to get going in the morning? Never. How often have you had a feeling of guilt or remorse after drinking? I'm going to put weekly, so once a week. How often have you been unable to remember what happened the night before? Never. Have you or someone else been injured in the past year? No. Has someone suggested that you cut down? Yes, but not in the past year. Okay, not a robot. And here are the results. Okay, medium score. Your score is 10 and places you in the category that we call risky or hazardous alcohol consumption.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Right. It's my next project, bro. It's my next project. I've stopped gambling, right? So now alcohol is the next Everest I must climb. And I'm donning my climbing gear right now.
Okay, bro.
This has been very, very insightful, dude. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we made a lot of progress today. Unfortunately, I've got another patient. I got another patient. So we have to wrap up our session for today. But keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it.
Okay, bro. Let's work it.
Okay, bro. Sounds good. Take care. Okay. Kip, how often do you have a drink? Every day? Kip, you're there. Kip, we miss you. Kip, it's been a long time. Speak up, Kip. Can't hear you.
Via Syria about Hezbollah. And there's 10 other,
Hey, Kip. Hey. What's going on, bro?
Hey, not too much. I think I had you muted. What did I miss?
I asked you how often do you have a drink?
Oh, I don't drink. I wouldn't call me a teetotaler though, because if you caught me on the right time with sort of a fruity drink, kind of a gay drink, I might have it if it was hot outside or whatever. But I'd never accept like beer or anything like that because it tastes like shit.
Okay. So what's on your mind this evening?
I was hoping to catch you and Elliot, but I guess is he off now?
I'm sorry. I kicked him. I didn't see you until after I'd kicked him.
You brought him in with the war and death, and then you went to lust, and then you went to drinking and smoking dope.
Yep.
That was the theme of the day, I guess. And I noticed I was going to mention to you that wine drinking, my dad, everybody's got a pipe dream. The old man was stuck fixing mainframe computers, but what he really wanted to do, he envied the guy that had the little liquor store, the little mom and pop liquor store. So he goes out there, I guess, in the early 90s and goes and gets him a little liquor store. And he thinks this will be great. But the liquor store wasn't facing the main road. It was kind of catty-cornered. And at least where we live, you can't advertise or anything. You can't get a girl with big boobs to be standing out in front of your liquor store. So, you can't go into collusion. You and I, Luke, if we had two liquor stores, we couldn't go in together and buy twice as much booze to get a better case discount. So he had all these illusions of how it was going to be so great, and it was awful. But one of the things I noticed as he was losing money on that liquor store dream was that wine at the time, when he first took over that liquor store, it was all about liquor. But all through the 90s, the liquor side kept getting smaller and the wine side kept getting bigger. And I think there was a bit, you don't believe me, but I think people are conned in a lot of the things. And one of the cons that the baby boomers had was that they loved wine because they thought it was like guilt-free. Somewhere along the way, 60 Minutes and some other people had conned them into thinking you could just have like a glass of wine a day. And not only would you not feel it, you'd be better off for it. And they believed that con, but somewhere around, I guess, 2017, 2018, as they started to die off, we've gotten to the point now to where a lot of the Napa wineries north of you can't even give the grapes away. What say you about that, Luke? You know anything about that?
I've never been a drinker, and my parents didn't drink. I come from a teetotaling religion. converted to Judaism, where people do drink, but I've still never been a drinker. So I know that until about 10 years ago, it was fashionable to argue that one drink a day was good for you. But now it's pretty definitive that you're best off with absolute minimum amount of alcohol.
Yeah, I believe you're right. And y'all were talking about weed earlier, and what it got me thinking while you and Elliot was talking was it got me thinking about in 1914, everything was legal. Opium, weed, morphine, heroin, you name it, everything was legal. And by God, I think Bayer made most or all of it. But all of a sudden in 1915, all that stuff kind of became illegal. And then about 1918 or 1919, come along the 18th and 19th Amendments, where they did prohibition and gave women the right to vote. So you can just tell within like a 5-year period, America lost its collective mind. I mean, can you imagine how it was kind of like a land of responsibility and accountability in 1914? And then here comes the foundation of the nanny state, you know? Also, I think the Fed was actually set up sometime in the early teens like that. But isn't that weird how things swung from everything being okay to all of a sudden nothing was okay? What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, it's the rise of the progressives. It's the rise of the female vote, and I don't think that prohibition was just uniformly a disaster. I think it was good in some ways and bad in others. So I don't want to return to prohibition, but I'm skeptical that it was just uniformly a disaster. I'm sure it benefited some people and was bad for other people. And overall for society, I'm open to either perspective, that it was overall did more harm than good, or overall more good than harm, if someone can make that case to me.
Yeah, you can tell that maybe the Faustian spirit was alive and well there in the late 1800s. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe it was that book Karl Marx had wrote or whatever, but you could tell, was it Emma Goodman or Goldman or something? Some lady got somebody frothed up around 1900, 1901, enough to go kill McKinley, the president. And you could just tell that shit was in the air. Not only here, it was in the air in Russia. It was in the air everywhere. A transition. And then I just I don't know. I just think about that. That was a real turning point. Just in every way of being. And then I kind of feel like the creep's been on there. You know, FDR comes along, he sets up things like AFDC, well-meaning. There are widows at the time. He doesn't know what it's going to be used to transform society in the early 60s into. But, you know, it's just been waves and waves of Marxist, feminist.
So do you think increased government intervention is just uniformly a bad thing? Or do you think there's a strong case to be made for having food inspectors, for example, and for cleaning up our air and cleaning up our water and making it mandatory to wear a seatbelt? So for me, yeah, I think government's become too big. I'm not a fan of the nanny state, but I recognize many positive contributions with the nanny state. So I like the idea of perhaps mandating seatbelt use.
Yeah, I love small convertibles. I have like a 2005 Toyota Spider MR2, little small thing. I've owned a few little Mercury Capri little convertibles. You can't even build something like that anymore. So it's a slippery slope. That nanny state stuff. I mean, it's on one hand, it's great that, you know, you got that, what is it called, Moore's Law, or where
yes,
rear view cameras and daytime running lights. It ends up being cheap on all the cars because they mandate it. But that's the slippery slope, Luke Ford. You get what I'm saying? That's the slippery slope. That's where we lead to this world of blandness, where every sedan looks exactly the same as my sedan. They just have just a few little things about them. But no, I think I was kind of maybe veering towards trying to make a point that I personally think America, at least so many cities seem to have peaked around 1920. And then you can tell that, let's say somewhere like Chicago had more people in 1920 than it has now. And it had 1 million more people in 1950 than it does now. So, and you can just go up down the line, Baltimore, St. Louis, Buffalo, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit. You can just be, especially all through the Rust Belt. But you can tell we were something up until that time. And then all of a sudden, whatever it was, there was a little bit kicking around. Some towns didn't seem to start dying until 1950. But others died earlier. You know, towns like Buffalo seemed to start dying around 1900. So I don't know. That's just kind of where I put the peak, because I'm still in my mind. Maybe I'm off, Luke, but I'm amazed by the sort of half man and half machine sort of people that we were bred by. You get what I'm saying? Just a few generations ago, we've changed so much from that. But it doesn't seem, when I look out on the counter, it's not that far back. But they just look like a totally different breed of human, you know, compared to modern man. But what do you think? Is that even something worth talking about? Or you got the same opinion, different opinion about where the ape was?
First of all, the population composition has changed significantly in the past 3 generations. So America in the 1920s was a 90% white America. America in the 1960s was a 90% white America. Now it's about a 60% white America. So the composition of the population has changed, and we do live in a more regulated nanny state. I think it comes with many good things and many bad things. I don't side with either we're getting worse or we're getting better. I see some ways we're getting better, some ways we're getting worse. I don't. So I'm not a conservative who thinks that things were so much better in the past, and I'm not a liberal who thinks that things are just so much better in the present. So I recognize there are ways that we are doing better, and there are equally as many ways that we're doing worse. So in basic morality, I think people were on a much higher level 2 or 3 generations ago, where you didn't have to lock your car, lock your home. There wasn't nearly as much crime, where neighbors looked out for each other, where people felt more entitled to keep other people's kids in line. So when we had more social cohesion and social trust, that was excellent.
Yeah, people in 100 years ago, even maybe up to around, I would say, the end of World War II.
1963, until JFK got shot and we got civil rights.
Yeah, people in places like, maybe not in Detroit, but you could hear people in like Cleveland and Buffalo. They used to not lock their doors at night. People in Pittsburgh used to not worry about locking their doors at night. So seems alien to me, doesn't it? Doesn't it seem alien to you?
Yeah, well, no, because I lived in Australia, and I know most people don't lock their doors or lock their cars. But into the 1960s, people weren't locking their cars and locking their homes in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles.
Yeah. I don't know.
And we get to choose. Like, we can choose how much crime we have by how aggressively we prosecute it and punish it. And so we have essentially chosen to live in a much less safe society. And given the dramatic increase in the quality of medical care, we have so many more violent assaults now, because all sorts of violent assaults that would have resulted in death in 1960, people now survive. So we have become way too slack, way too easy with criminals, particularly violent criminals. I am all for locking them away, and for killers, executing them. We can decide how much crime we put up with. And so I am very much on board with prosecuting violent criminals in particular.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about the future, because I do think back to the fact that maybe there was 2 billion people when my dad was born, and now there's over 8 billion people. And we can see the morals and ethics of them, of modern man. So it does make me Kind of wonder where it's all going. Let's see. I was going to mention something to you about maybe a little side bet you and I could have that I think I'm more along the lines of thinking that Israel will probably cease to be as we know it before the Francis Scott Key Bridge gets rebuilt in Baltimore. Which side would you take on that?
I think we're still going to have an independent Jewish state in 20 years. So, yeah, I would have the opposite side of that bet from you.
When we go back to looking at the the history going all back to late 1800s, did we ever, because it seems like you really know your stuff, what was the historical reason for giving Palestine to them?
Oh, well, there was no talk in the 19th century about giving Palestine, but Palestine was not an independent.
It wasn't until 1917, and of course, that's when I guess the Balfour Declaration was. But what is that stemming from?
Yeah, so in the second half of the 19th century, there was this growing sense in Europe that Jews deserved to return to their own land. And so that stemmed from tension over the Jewish question in Europe in particular, and also there was a solid Zionist strand in Christianity that was influenced by the Hebrew Bible. So that became a movement in the latter half of the 19th century. And most crucially, it got going and organized itself more effectively than a similar movement among the Palestinians by about 10 to 20 years. So the Zionists got a head start and they were more effective. And at the time, say in 1870, I think the land of what is now Israel was about 95% Arab. And then by 1920, right, the ratio had moved. There were Jews pouring into the land, and they were more intelligent, more effective than the Arabs who lived there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I collect is old encyclopedias, and I've got a couple of encyclopedias where there's not a thing such as Israel, but there is a place called Palestine, and I found one of the interesting sets of encyclopedias that I keep referring back to was published like in late 42. I mean, right in the thick of things. You get what I'm saying? So I find that stuff so interesting. But I find really a lot of history is better from like 1950 and before. That seems to be too much bullshit. After that time period, everybody's got their spin on everything. I was going to ask you that.
Wait, hang on. Let me just finish on this point. I just found a chart. So in 1517, Jews were about 2% of the population of Israel-Palestine. And then by 1882, they were 8%. By 1914, they were 14%. By 1922, they were 11%. By 1936, they were 28%. By 1946, they were 30%. And then by 1948, they were 82%. So they'd driven out most of the Arabs by 1948. And they'd moved from 30% to 82% in 2 years.
In my old encyclopedias, there's never any fighting in that area. So what do you think that's all about? Seems like they've been there for like 75 years or so, and it's like a hornet's nest the whole time. What's that all about?
Well, different groups have different interests, and particularly when you have a small geographic area where only one people is going to rule. And now, when you're referring to your old encyclopedias, you'd have to tell me what year. There have been Arab-Jewish conflicts for 130 years in the land of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think late 30s and early 40s is the old ones that I have. But
right, so there wasn't an independent Jewish state until 1948, but there was no other independent state of any kind in the previous 2,000 years. So it wasn't as though the Arabs had their own independent state on that land. They could never get it together. I mean, Arabs have been pretty pathetic for hundreds of years in terms of organizing in their own self-interest.
Now, I did think of those people in Israel as a special breed of people because I saw something 15, 20 years ago that showed school kids writing nasty notes on bombs that they were going to be, I guess, sometime in the future, drop it on somebody's head. And that's a special kind of thinking. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's created because of geographically where they are, but I mean, it goes all the way to the school children.
Right, but isn't that normal? I mean, wouldn't American kids love to write messages on bombs, say during World War One or World War Two, or just for fun? I think that's much more of a normal male thing. I don't think it's unique to Jews. Wouldn't you think a normal kid, a normal boy, would just love to write a message on a bomb that he would hope would be dropped on his enemies one day?
Yeah, maybe so, but I think that's why it made so much impact because it was schoolgirls, it wasn't boys. So, you know,
Oh, yeah, that is interesting.
that's maybe that's why it made more of a mental impression. Is there's one thing I've never asked you is what actually, when you get down to the nuts and bolts, what do Jews believe? Maybe there's something in the core beliefs that's incompatible with all their neighbors. What do they believe at the end of the day?
Beliefs have nothing to do with it. It's just different groups have different interests. I mean, was it core beliefs that drove to genocidal conflict between Houthis and Tutsis, right? Is it core beliefs that drives conflict between the Irish and the English, the Protestants and the Catholics in Ireland? No, it's different ethnic groups have different interests, and they don't want to be ruled by the other, by the stranger. So I don't think there's anything in beliefs. It's that every people wants sovereignty, and every living thing wants to create an environment that is most conducive to its thriving. So whether it's pond scum or raccoons or eucalypti trees or Jews or Nigerians, every living thing wants to create an environment most conducive to its own thriving.
Mm-hmm. I got sideways last week with the people up at the county and ended up having a talk with this county superintendent. And I just want to get you to see if I was the dick or if maybe I wasn't. Can I start with the
Yep.
In late February, my roads started chewing up, all the repairs they had done to the potholes. With the freeze we had in February, they just started crumbling, and all these potholes started being exposed. And I got caught in the rain, and my 45 series tires ended up popping the sidewall. You can't plug that. So I called, I bitched. We got on the list to get the pothole fixed. I called back in June or July when a second inside sidewall of my tire had failed going through a pothole. Now, again, I'm getting to the age where my eyes aren't the best, but where I'm really fallible is in the rain and at night. So I call them like the following Monday, raising Cain, and they're like, "Oh, I'm glad you called. We sent somebody out there. They agreed with you that the road was in piss poor condition, and they're gonna repair it. It might take us a couple of months, but we're actually gonna resurface the road for you." I said, "Okay, that'll be great." A third tire failed like last week. And here it is, the end of September. And everybody's known since before Easter that we got too many potholes on this road. Is that on me? Or is that on them for leaving me hanging for 7 months? Because I kind of unloaded on the superintendent.
Wait. Now, is this a motorcycle or a car?
A car.
Oh, okay. So, all right, you usually aren't going to win fights with City Hall. So, yeah, I would say unloading on them is not going to do you any good. It's a situation where they have the power and you don't, and you would really like them to help you out. But no matter how much you suffer, right, it's really hard to move a government bureaucracy like that.
Yeah, 7 months. What was making it hurt? What was making my heart have these crazy palpitations was the fact that they agreed with me in late June when the second one blew that the road was unserviceable. But and they knew that their little road patches only last for about 3 or 4 months. So by God, if they knew the list to get the road fixed was a few months out, come patch the road. Come patch my road. Now, my old man says, why don't you just creep over that road? I'm like, Dad, I try to go 25, 30. What happens is somebody pops over the hill. You're forced into using half the road, and there's the potholes. So I don't know. You're right. You can't beat City Hall. And I knew that when I got on the phone with them. And for the record, they blamed Tinsley Paving. That's who they blamed, and said because they need the equipment and the operator from them, and they don't have a schedule to October the 20th. So that's 3 tires, $100 a pop. And I was just a little bit hot about it. And then I got one.
Yeah. I was hot about something. I had to see a doctor for a very minor thing, and I got permission to drop in, but I didn't have a proper appointment, so I had to wait 90 minutes, and I was hot, but I had rationally no basis for being hot. I was angry and annoyed, but I rationally had no basis for being angry or annoyed because I was dropping in on them. Go ahead.
Yeah. You were probably in your mind, you were doing jumping jacks when they said they were going to see you, but what they really said is, we're going to fit you in. And those 3 words meant everything, didn't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So, that sucks. The other little pet peeve I have that kind of gets on my nerves is I always get sucked into these like shows that talk about the scientific revolution and all that kind of stuff. And it all starts the same way. They eventually will get around the guys like Isaac Newton, and they'll start talking about laws of motion and mass and inertia and all this kind of stuff. And they'll say that, the guy followed all leads. He practiced alchemy, but for some reason, he was so dumb he thought he could turn base metals into gold. But strangely enough, most everybody in the 17th century was alchemists. And then they go on to the next bit of the story. They never tell the part about, funny, there was never any more alchemists after the church didn't have the power to hang people like Giordano Bruno. You get what I'm saying, Luke?
So when the practice and belief of alchemy did not result in the death penalty, you had more alchemists than when it did result in the death penalty.
No. What I'm saying is alchemy was a spiritual thing, and guys like Isaac Newton was smart enough where he found there was a way to, like I told you happened to me in 2007, there's a way to like turn on an intelligence in a person. But dudes like Isaac Newton, I don't know how he was doing it, proto-chemistry, whatever. Some guys probably use what you might call entheogens, they cheated. Instead of just doing straight up spiritual disciplines. But however he did it, he was able, instead of like me, which maybe was able to get visited by that intelligence, and it just kind of point me the way to getting past desires, egos, and fears and that kind of stuff. Isaac Newton took it a step further. Guys like him would say, tell me a little bit about light. You get what I'm saying? And then he would try to like pass it on to guys like us, but that part of the story never gets told, it never gets told. So I don't know if you had any.
That's because the odds are that Isaac Newton was delusional about his capacity to engage in alchemy. So if you give me if I were a betting man, I would always bet on the side of the natural laws of the world rather than on spiritual miracles. I don't deny the possibility of spiritual miracles. They're a part of my religious tradition, but I would always bet on the side of natural laws. And if I was trying to figure out reality, or if I was trying to figure out history, I would always come down on the side of natural laws rather than some guy having spiritual powers that allow him to overturn or adjust natural laws. So I will always side with the rules of gravity and the other rules of nature over claims of spiritual transcendence of natural laws.
What I'm trying to tell you is those dudes were mystics.
Right, and I'm
They
skeptical.
contacted the same thing that the Greeks called their daemon. You get what I'm saying? So that's where that stuff comes from.
That's what they believed they were doing, and I would wager that they were deluded, but I am open to the possibility that they were interacting with real spiritual powers that transcend, even contradict natural laws. I'm open to that, but I would side with natural laws.
Well, did you catch up? Did you catch on to the fact through history classes that the West started trying to play catch up once they what was those holy wars over in the Holy Land?
The Crusades.
Yeah, the Crusades. They got some Islamic texts from the Crusades and started playing a little bit of catch up at that time. I'm speaking of the West in general. And then again, in the late 1400s, 1500s, they started getting a lot of the writings from the Byzantium, Empire, and in places like Italy, and they started making a lot of, all those Michelangelo types and all those guys in Italy started making a lot of catch up from all those texts that, like I say, the West was playing catch up. The Eastern Empire was so much further ahead. And then, of course, Isaac Newton and all those guys, it's just the natural progression going on. But I just think that the whole thing is like a neat story, because somewhere along the way, somewhere about the 6th century AD, the Romans took that knowledge away. And I think maybe it was hidden amongst maybe a couple little French underground religious cults or whatever. But it was definitely lost to the general public. And it was that catching up, and like you would say, not only did we catch up, maybe we got out a little ahead,
So are you a believer in Theosophy, right? The philosophy and religion that is based on the idea that God can be known through mystical insight and the universe is one interrelated whole?
I know. I mean, so you just have to take that for...
Yeah, you're a mystic. You've had a genuine experience.
I don't guess. I don't think if I play my cards right or whatever. I've been there, and it went on for 5 months, and then it was looking at all these what you might call comparative religious studies that I noticed that all these religious sects were talking about, the Sufis or whatever, all the esoteric styles of all these religions. We're talking about basically the same thing. They have their own traditions and their own methods for getting there, but the furthest ahead, strangely enough, were maybe the people in the high altitude lands around Tibet and all that kind of stuff. Man, they could take it to different levels, but I don't think, I know, and it's the same way that somebody like me identifies as somebody like Carl Jung, because strangely enough, he was able to he called himself an old witch doctor that finds his God from his dreams. So that would be cool. I would think that would be cool to wake up every day and get to decode your dreams or whatever. But I guess I don't live a fancy enough life, because my dreams aren't that interesting if I can remember them at all. Do you dream very often?
I do at times, and they can be incredibly intense. And sometimes I'll write them down. So one of my favorite dreams is that I get on a balloon and I sail across the ocean to Australia or New Zealand from California.
Yeah, the thing about that, what was weird during that period, and again, that was like from June to December of 2007. What was weird about that, Luke, is you've been told all your life that, when you start talking to yourself, maybe you've went crazy or whatever. But I was so jacked up because I kept thinking maybe one day I'd wake up and that power would be gone or whatever. And sure enough, eventually I had to go like back into the world. You got to like take a deep breath and try to go back into the world. But I guess I remember how I got there before, and it's kind of like the Buddhist ideology of right thought, right mind. But there's actually a physical component too. You got to be, your body actually has to be ready for such an experience. I remember I was 262 at the start of the experience, and like 5 months later, I think I was down to like 188. And I eventually, where I settled in was to maybe 170, 175. So it was it's what you might call a mind, body, and soul experience. But it's so wild. But I will tell you, in your own tradition, they have the Kabbalah. And of course, like anything, you probably need a rabbi to show it to you. But I'm sure I can tell by the literature on stuff that's right up. That's the esoteric part of the Jewish faith, right there.
Right, and you have to be over 40 and married and with kids and already be fully observant of Jewish law before you're allowed to study Kabbalah. So it was not encouraged for just anyone to pick it up.
Yeah, it happened to me at like 38 or 39, and that's from what I understand. You have to maybe be through one segment of your life or whatever to even be eligible for such a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could maybe have been chosen. So there was a lot of things involved. I had a change in the career or whatever, but there was had to be an openness and a readiness for an experience, and plus the fact. Had I not been given some message to go tell my dog he can go now, and then I gave that dog that message under the kind of guise of, what would it hurt? And then the dog takes one breath and dies on me. And then I'm like sad for like 3 weeks. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How did I know? Now, it's going back to that moment. Most people would want to just close that chapter and go on, but I'm the weird one that wants to scratch at something, and sometimes it gets the best of me. But in this situation, I can only tell you, Luke, the change is so permanent. Little things like those stupid Taco Bell signs and McDonald's signs or whatever. I don't think I've eaten fast food since 2007. It has no pull to me. Maybe it must have before. I didn't think it had any before, but it must have. Because I used to drop in and get a burger or something from time to time, but none of that stuff has any pull to me. But anyway, I've kept you long enough about that.
Okay, Kip, great to catch up with you. Let's do it again another time. I got
See
nothing further.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. So I want to talk about something in the chat that I've gone back and forth on over the years. Look, you don't think that religion plays a major role in the Arab-Israeli conflict? And I've gone back and forth on this over the years. When my worldview was much more drenched from a religious perspective, I thought religion was more important than I do now, where I look at the world as much more driven by ethnic interests and by genetics. So I do not believe that religion plays a major role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. I am open to Israel playing a major role, but I do not currently believe that it plays a major role, just as religion does not play a major role in the conflict in Ireland between Protestants and Catholics, right? It's called a Protestant-Catholic dispute, but it's really two different ethnic groups, and religion is just a manifestation. It's a symptom, not a cause. So right now, as I stand here, I don't believe that religion plays a major role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. The chat says, I'm assuming you think that religion is used in service of some deeper instinctive drive. Yes, we prefer those who are genetically similar to us. It's a conflict between different peoples. And I think that if Arabs and Israelis were entirely secular, I have no reason to believe that the conflict would be any less intense, right? You've got two people who both have a long history and a strong claim to the land, right? The Palestinians have a long history and a strong claim to the land, and Jews have a long history and a strong claim to the land. So I'm not sure if these groups were entirely secular or entirely religious. Either way, I'm not sure if it would make the conflict less intense. So open question, is ethnocentrism negatively or positively correlated with secularism? I am tempted to say positively, because when you had a religious worldview or a worldview based upon social class, then if you believe that the monarchy, all right, had been ordained by God, and so if you're a member of the monarchy in any way, you felt more in common with other monarchies in other nations. If you were a merchant, you felt more in common with merchants in other nations. If you were a worker or a peasant, probably felt more in common with peasants from other nations than with merchants and monarchy in your own nation. So is ethnocentrism negatively or positively correlated with secularism? Tempted to say positive, in the sense that when the world was much more religious and much more traditional, then ethnocentrism and nationalism didn't play as large a role. So we really had the growth of nationalism in the 17th century. England got it first. Then by the 18th century, the French got it. And then by the 19th century, all the major powers in Europe got it, and they took it to the rest of the world. So before nationalism, perhaps religion was the dominant way shaping how people identified and were willing to kill. So yes, the monarchies of Europe were literally